Hey you guys, this is Sarah Prince with The Sarah Show. I wanted to jump on here really quick and let you know, actually, I have done a podcast show before. 2 years ago, I had a podcast called Breakthrough to Your Beautiful Life, where we talked about ways to increase your awareness so that you can change the life and follow your heart in the way that you truly desire. But life happened and that podcast no longer exists. So I wanted to play it for you here on The Sarah Show as the first 20 episodes or so, just as an added bonus, absolutely free, because a lot of what I talked about on that podcast is very similar to what we will be talking about on this podcast. So please enjoy, and I look forward to sending new episodes to you with The Sarah Show in the weeks to come.
Breakthrough to Your Beautiful Life podcast. I'm Sarah Prince, your friend and mentor, here to help you do just that, breakthrough to your beautiful life. Today we are talking about intuition. What is this thing we call intuition? How do you use it? How do you know if it's truly intuition? Let's talk about that. So I looked up the official dictionary definition of intuition, and it said your intuition is the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. So in short, you just know. You understand something right away. You just know. It hits you, and I think we can all relate to this on some level. Have you ever had an experience where maybe out of the blue, completely unrelated to what you were doing or where you were, you just knew something? Maybe it was something you needed to do. Maybe it was an answer to a problem you'd been trying to figure out. Maybe you suddenly knew something that had happened to a loved one who wasn't even around, and it just came to you. You just knew. You didn't know why, right? We hear about experiences like this a lot, but then we also hear about, I've heard people use their intuition like all the time when they make decisions, but how do I do that? I don't quite get it. I don't quite understand. For some folks, it can be confusing. Like, isn't intuition just supposed to be this random thing that happens, and when you know, you absolutely know, and then you know, right? But perhaps they don't believe that they can tap into it on a regular basis, because it's supposed to be just this grand, random act of the universe sort of thing, right? How can it be a regular, everyday thing that you just use like a tool? Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit. But I know you can relate to having an experience, or you know someone that did, where they just knew something, or you just knew something immediately. You didn't know why, but it was clear as a bell. So the hard part about all of this is, the main question I always get is, Sarah, how can you tell the difference between intuition and your thoughts, right? Because they can feel like the same thing. They can come in the same way, right? You have a thought or an idea comes to your mind, or a feeling. How am I going to know the difference? Well, the difference is intuition, because it comes from a higher power, your source, be it the universe, God, your inner being, whatever you believe, where your intuition comes from, because it is a higher power, it comes faster than your thoughts. There's this little gap, this little window in our mind with how fast our brain can work between intuition and thoughts. When you receive intuition, it takes your brain 3 to 5 seconds to catch up. So let's say you have an idea, and then a few seconds after that you have another idea that the first idea wasn't right. That first idea you had, the first thought, the first thing that came to your mind, that was your intuition. And the second thing that came, like your reaction to that idea, your judgment of that idea, your continuous thinking about that idea, those are your thoughts. It takes a few seconds longer for your brain to catch up with answering a question or with generating an idea, because that's just how long it takes the neurons in our brain to fire. So intuition, let me repeat this. Intuition comes, let's say you ask a question. Someone asks you, what does your intuition tell you about how you need to solve this problem, whatever the problem is? The first thing that comes to your head, the first thing that you feel, maybe you feel something, maybe an idea, an image, a word, any sort of thoughts, anything like that, the first thing that comes into your mind, that's your intuition. But then this few seconds after it, when you start to think, did I think that? Or was that my intuition? Or did I only just think that because of this other thing that's going on? No, I don't know if that's going to work. I don't see how that makes sense. That can't be my intuition, right? All that other stuff that happens after that first initial idea came to your mind, everything after that is your brain and your mind trying to make sense of what is going on and trying to put into place patterns and habits of thought with doubts or fears or confusion or disbelief that may come from that initial intuitive thought. So that is how you tell the difference. Because usually when we have an idea that comes from our intuition, it's fresh, it's new, it just appears in our mind, right? It just suddenly arrives, like it's just there. You weren't trying to think of that because it just happened. So when you're trying to think of something, you know how people say, picture a clear blue sky in your mind. And automatically, easily, okay, yeah, I'm picturing a clear blue sky. You know what that looks like. You've seen it before. You were told to picture it in your mind, and you did it. Easy. That's different. That is not intuition. Your intuition it doesn't come from being told what to think about specifically. So for example, if you ask yourself a question, what do I need to do about this problem? That first idea that comes is your intuition speaking. But if you say it in a way, I think that the solution is this and that, and you just kind of dwell on it, well, you told your brain to dwell on what you thought was the correct solution or what you thought was the answer. It needs to be open-ended and ultimately surrendering and receptive to whatever ideas come so that you're not planting things in your brain before those ideas come. Does that make sense? Because when you're speaking to yourself or someone's asking you questions or talking to you in a manner that they're automatically putting the ideas in your head or telling you what to picture or telling you what they think the answer is, and you go along with it, that's not intuition. Intuition is completely open-ended. Before you judge or reason or analyze it in your mind. You're almost always alone when this happens. So, for example, let me give you an example of how intuition might come. Say you're in a work meeting, you're sitting at the table, the boss is asking questions of the group, wants input about a particular work project that you guys are tackling, and say your boss asks a question and you're kind of in a state of, I want to be doing better at work. I want to shine in front of the boss. I want to have my ideas heard more, but perhaps you've been quiet about it. And say you're in this meeting and your boss asks the whole team, the group, a question, what do you think we should do about this? And that immediate first idea that comes in your mind, because it's an open-ended question, it's completely non-judgmental, that first thing that comes to your mind, that was your intuition. Say the question is, what do you think we can do to increase our sales this month? And you immediately think of a completely random, maybe it's unpredictable, maybe it is completely new, maybe it doesn't make sense, but it's that intuitive, immediate idea planted in your brain. And you want to share it, right? Like, oh, okay. But then, have you often sat back and waited a few seconds, like, well, maybe someone else is going to say something first. I don't know if my idea is that great. It's kind of out of the box. I don't think they're going to like it. I'm just going to wait. And then, have you had it happen that in that same meeting, your team member speaks up and they give the exact same idea? Or further along down the line, they present a solution that is something you thought about or you had come to you that you dwelled on, but it was days or weeks before, and you never said anything. This is an example of an everyday situation where your intuition is trying to help you. Because ideas are just born and they want to come out and be planted, and if you're not going to act on the idea that comes to you from your intuition, it may just go to someone else. So keep that in mind. You can use this every day. You can ask every day and tap into your intuition with whatever you want, with as much as you want. We had a previous episode with my friend Michelle Lewis she's a soul shine specialist, and she gave her perspective on intuition about how we have all of the answers we need that are already inside of us. And that was her perspective on how we can tap into our intuition, because it does come from within, right? Our ideas don't come from a billboard or something we're reading or writing. They originate within us, in our mind, in our bodies, in our hearts, however you feel it or see it or receive it. That's how our intuition works. So if you've read the book, this is kind of a cool example. I remember in Think and Grow Rich, written by Napoleon Hill. It's a really famous book. He shares this story where he was really downtrodden, in debt, I believe, and just couldn't make ends meet. And all of a sudden, he was asking himself, what can I do? And he suddenly had this thought to go up to another city far away to meet with someone for a business question, like to go meet someone he knew in this other city. I think it was Philadelphia, to meet them for a business idea. And he the story goes, he thought it was so crazy because he didn't even have the money to travel to Philadelphia, I believe it was, to even speak to this other person. And back then, it wasn't like you could just pick up your cell phone and text them or call them. I guess you could send a telegraph, but his intuition told him, you need to get to this town to meet with this person to ask them this thing immediately. And he had no idea what was going to come of it. He had no idea how he was going to get there. He had no idea how he was going to pay for the travel, like to take the train. And he ended up he ended up following through on that intuition, and he ended up making thousands and thousands of dollars in a business deal, I believe. And it was more than he made in like the last year or something like that. Like, it was a huge change in his life, all because he had followed through and paid attention to this intuitive idea that had come to him so suddenly. So hopefully, through talking about these ideas, you've seen there are similar characteristics of when we know our intuition is giving us something. Our intuition is telling us. We often can receive an intuitive answer as like a word, as an answer to a question, or a phrase, or a thought, a simple idea about what we need to do, or maybe an image comes to mind of a place we need to go, or we have just a feeling accompany that, and it's often a very calm and peaceful or inspirational feeling. They're always positive. They're not negative feelings. They're always positive. And sometimes you can get, your intuition can give you a little piece of an idea, and you don't quite understand what that idea is, and you can ask for more clarification, and then one thing leads to another so that the whole idea comes together. So let me give you an example of that. One time I was meditating and I was asking a question about, I honestly can't remember, but it was something that I needed to do that day, something I needed to do to make something happen, something with some intentions I had set with my to-dos that day. And I asked, and what came to from my intuition was this. I pictured like an arrow, like a line that turned into an arrow that was pointing down and to the side in my mind. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? I didn't understand it. And so I got the feeling you need to turn your head and look down and to the side, follow the path of the arrow. And I did, and I turned and I looked, and there on the side of my chair was this book that I had sitting there. And then the idea came to me, you need to finish reading this book. And I'm like, oh, awesome. So sometimes one thing leads to another as your ideas progress. See, now the image of an arrow pointing down in my mind, like, obviously that didn't tell me go and read this book you have sitting here. It was pointing me in the direction I needed to look. So I thought that was kind of cool, because answers from our intuition don't always come like a lightning bolt or, thunder in our ears of this deep, intense answer, hearing a sentence of you need to do this. It's often kind of elusive, and sometimes we need to go back and, like my example just now, I had to ask, what does this arrow mean? Because I didn't know. I didn't understand what that meant. And it led me to actually reading this book. And so keep that in mind too, that it's not always just cut and dry. It can be pliable and flexible, but you've just got to be open to it. Another characteristic of intuitive answers that come to you is they happen almost always less than 5 seconds after you ask, because just a few seconds and your brain has caught up into thinking mode, into trying to analyze or solve or come up with its own justifications why the thing you're asking is irrelevant or can't be questioned. Things like that. It's always going to be quick, like we talked about at the beginning of this episode. And the last characteristic is they often don't make sense, right? So often, if you are a praying person, we will pray for something, right? I'm trying to do this. I need help with this. Please help me do this. What can I do? Etc. And if you've received an answer, perhaps from prayer, that's one avenue of going about it. Have you ever received an answer like, well, that doesn't make sense? Are you going to do that? Often, these little teeny steps that we need to take that our intuition sends us, most of the time they do not make sense. Like Napoleon Hill with his story of needing to travel to Philadelphia to meet with someone, it made no sense to him. He didn't know why. But he also didn't question it. Often we cannot connect the dots until we look back, right? It happens with every experience in our life. How often have you looked back on something that you've just been through, a trial or a phase of life, and looking back you realize, oh my gosh, that made so much sense. Now I can see why this happened and why this happened and why this happened and how important they were. The same exact thing is happening to you right now in your everyday. The actions that you take and the guidance that is given you often does not make sense until you can look back and you see the path that you've gone or the full picture as it's formed. Just like the tiny piece of a puzzle, you cannot tell what is on that single piece until you've put the whole puzzle together. So when you receive an idea from your intuition that doesn't make sense, that's okay. Don't judge it. Surrender to it. Don't think about it. Just do it and accept that's your answer. So you can practice this after prayer or meditating, or anytime you calm your mind with deep breathing and you're in a state of reception. If you're stressed or frustrated or angry and your mind is going a million miles an hour, you are not going to receive intuition. It's impossible. Because your energy and your spirit and your mind, how they all work together, they're not receptive in that state. The best time to ask for intuitive answers to whatever your questions are or whatever actions you need help with knowing what to do it after you've calmed your mind. Perhaps it can be, as I suggested, after meditating or even when you're falling asleep and your mind is calmed down. You can do it with your eyes closed or open. I often do it with my eyes closed so I'm not distracted. And if sounds often distract you, try to be in a place where you're not going to be disturbed, or maybe you've got headphones on with just meditative music on. Maybe you have earplugs in. Maybe you're out in nature and that's just fine. But just pay attention to the first thing that comes to your mind. And then write it down. And if it's an action, have the courage to do it or explore it. If it's not an action, maybe it's just a calm reassurance about something, then just say thank you. Have some gratitude that you received it. Trust and believe that it is exactly what you need to know at that moment, even if it doesn't make sense. I think I shared this on the podcast I mentioned with Michelle Lewis. I told the story of one time I asked, what is the next thing I need to do about this, whatever it was, and what came to me was get up and walk into the next room. And I was in my bathroom on my chair. I got up and I walked into my bedroom. I'm like, okay, I'm here. What's the next thing I need to do? And it was keep walking or something like that. It was so long ago, I don't quite remember. But I do remember that it didn't make sense. Maybe I just needed to stop meditating and get to work. Maybe I just needed to go out and about to help the others in my home. I didn't quite see how that resolution came from that experience, but I did it anyway. Have the courage to do what your intuition tells you and accept it lovingly with gratitude, because again, it won't make sense, but it is almost always the right thing that you need to know at that time. So awesome. Let me know if you regularly tap into your intuition. It's a great skill. I use it almost every single day now, and I take those steps to keep receiving what I need to know, because we're only human, right? And there's so much more knowledge out there that we don't have within us already, and intuition helps send those answers to us with whatever we're going through or need to know in our lives. So, fantastic. Please take a moment today, do these quick little things of how to ask and receive anything from your intuition about something that's on your mind or what you need help with, anything, and be absolutely open to whatever comes. And if you want to share that with me and with us in the community, or comment below this podcast on whatever channel you're using, I would love to hear from you, because it's amazing and incredible what can come when we follow and listen to our intuition with what is sent to us, because it can change our life. So fantastic. I hope this serves you well. You can hop into our free Facebook group, the Breakthrough to Your Beautiful Life group. You can go to sarahbethprince.com/Facebook, and it'll take you right there, where we have more awesome conversations about things just like this that you hear on the podcast, and I would love to see you inside of there. Again, please subscribe, rate, and review, or share this podcast with someone you think it would highly benefit, which is just about everybody. And I look forward to hearing from you. We'll talk soon. Have a great day.